Okay, I would like to extend, first of all, Ixoburdian greetings to all the viewers who will be watching this in the extended future. And tonight's video, I thought I would be talking about, I will be talking about, I don't think I will be talking about, I guarantee you I will be talking about, uh, what if alt history. And the reason I decided to talk about what if alt hist is that not only is he a recent arrival on the scene, comparatively speaking, but also because I like to take figures who are preeminent or somewhat well known anyway, and use them as an example of whatever my thesis might be. So we have a living embodiment of whatever that particular thesis might be. We have, for example, I recently did a video on West Coast Natural Wolverine. The guy is the embodiment of the hero archetype. I did a video on Ed Lattimore. Ed Lattimore is the embodiment of the black grifter pimp mindset. Now, yeah, you'd say Ed Lattimore's not a pimp. Well, yeah, but at the end of the day, he still lives off a white woman who works for a living. And so, that's a black guy's way. That's the black man's way. That's the idea of pimping, is you live off the woman's work or activity or whatever. You live off the woman's whoring, which, I mean, she's whoring herself out to her corporate job. And in the case of Ed's wife, assuming he's actually married to her, Ed talked her into just having a religious service. So they're not actually legitimately married. But in any case, then I also used 88 millimeter flak as an example. And in the past, we're going to come back to flak here in a minute. Flak's an example of traders on in this sphere, these circles. Flak is an example of traders in these circles. But years ago, I talked about Schaefer Cox. Schaefer Cox, as I've talked to him, I'm the only one who's brought him up in many years, and he's currently languishing in a federal bastille, and nobody cares about him anymore. I'm the only one who brings him up. I'm the only one who references him, and the only thought guys like 88 millimeter flak have is how many Hostess fruit pies they can fit in their fat gut. That's the only conscious thought in their minds day to day. And so consequently, we use all of these characters, all of these real life people as embodiments for ideas. And that's what I'm doing with 88 or with What If Alt History. So I was completely unfamiliar with What If Alt Hist up to a couple of weeks ago. I was blessedly ignorant. I was, what is the term when you say you're I was completely innocent of any knowledge of what if alt hists up to a couple of weeks ago. Now, I was enjoying the current meltdown, but then I started thinking about it because I take no pleasure in these people's meltdowns. I the one reason I might have to enjoy the idea of this young man melting down is that he is not submitted to me, namely, and given homage where homage is due, and ultimately that's my fault for not submitting him. So today, if you want submission, you have to submit the person. You have to make them tap out verbally or otherwise. So that's on me. So I can't hold that against him that he has failed to pay tribute to me. So I wanted to talk about him in the sense of his work and his impact on the right, and how he is the embodiment of various ideas and concepts. One of them people talk about a lot is he's a schizo. I don't believe he's a schizo at all. I believe a lot of his thoughts are genuine. They're not at all schizophrenic. Schizophrenia is a very interesting concept that most people need to study more, and often as not, when people are talking about schizophrenia, they're just making a value judgment to be derisive, to discount the opinion of the person who they wish to negate, so whose work they officially want to negate, so they just say schizo. That idea is schizo. Now, bear in mind, we live in a time where people's minds are closing. We live in a period of time where people's minds are no longer narrow. They're almost they're very close to closed. They're not narrow. There's no gap there where any new logic can get in, or people are capable of using their minds in any way, shape, or form. So, the idea that he's a schizo, I think, is incorrect, or they is schizo takes. Schizo takes are just a way of saying crazy takes, just like people say spicy when referring to sexual acts that are in no way spicy. There's nothing remotely spicy. People refer to generic sexual behavior nowadays as spicy because if fundamentally they're gay, and the most basic sexuality is referred to as spicy nowadays as a term of spicy. What
No, you're right.
you agree? And that's the idea of any effort. I'm watching this basketball game, was ogling and watching, and the whole cheerleading team is made up of trannies. So we've come to a period of time where anybody who demonstrates any kind of energy, intellectual, physical, or otherwise, is basically considered to be a problem. So people have this idea of feminine sexuality, and I deviate on a tangent, but we're going to come back to this because this is very important to understand the concept of schizo and understand this gentleman's mental health, since he's just broken down entirely. So, with the concept of feminine sexuality, the only where it really exists in modern society, and I've talked about this before, is the tranny and the drag queen, which are male dominated areas where they reenact feminine sexuality, or they basically recreate versions of feminine sexuality that are obviously, there's obviously done by men. That's the whole purpose of the drag queens, the camp, and so forth and so on. And that's because feminine sexuality does not exist in the wider universe. So it only exists within the purview of the tranny and the drag queen. It doesn't exist, which are male creations. So outside of those creations, it does not exist in the wild. And a lot of people don't understand that, so they don't understand the concept behind it. It's not allowed in society today, feminine sexuality overall. Now, male sexuality is also not allowed in society either, and that's to the side, but then we're going to the idea of the schizo. So there's a lot of things that you can't be without being considered, that people consider there's something wrong with you, or that you're a problem. And so this is the case with the idea of the schizo and the concept of the schizo. And to his eternal chagrin, or it should be to his eternal chagrin, this what if alt hist buys into a lot of this when he talks about PTSD and trauma and so forth and so on. But we'll get into that. The main thrust of this I want to make is that the allegations of schizophrenia against him and many others are grotesquely overrated. So what's going on? People say, well, he demonstrate the classic symptoms of schizophrenia? Isn't schizophrenia congenital in his family? It's congenital, right?
Congenital means it's already there when you're born.
Yeah. But now I did understand, and this may be primarily with black people, that it's usually the mother's brother that demonstrates signs of schizophrenia rather than the mother herself, who will in other words, if the uncle has schizophrenia, chances are the male issue from the sister of the man will have schizophrenia. So in the case of what if old hist, I guess his name is Rudyard. He was named Rudyard, and that's kind of unfortunate, and that's kind of the. I'm going to talk a lot about this actually. It's kind of the misfortune of people born in the 2000s. Cut on the generic right is that the guy names him Rudyard after the poet, the great Rudyard Kipling. He names his son Rudyard. Boy, my beard's looking long.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And it's kind of unfortunate that a child grows to adulthood, and there's no Rudy is not really a option. That's never going to be an option for the poor kid. The way he grows up, or the way he's raised anyway, he's never going to have the option to be have the name shortened to Rudy. It's always going to be Rudyard, and that's always going to be a problem. So that a lot of times it doesn't begin with the name. It begins at conception. It begins before conception. But he says, "Oh, my father had autism. He had the mercury when he inseminated my mother, and that's why I was born with autism. And he had mercury poison, this and that. A lot of it had to do with being named Rudyard. A lot of what they say, what's in a name? What's in a name is everything, and a lot of his failure in life comes from being named Rudyard. And so we're going to talk about the meltdown, all the problems he's had, and everything. I guess I'll start from the beginning. It comes from a little bit of money. It comes from what they call generational wealth, or lack of generational wealth, because his father made some money at the behest of the government, I believe, enough to survive the divorce and whatever else. Still has some money. His mother is a Virginia. Well, he's from Pennsylvania, Virginia. It's all the same. It's not all the same specifically, but you have to understand the horse culture between Virginia and Pennsylvania is very similar. And a lot of people that show or are in the horse business in one state or in the horse market or whatever in Virginia, they interact with people from Pennsylvania, or they might go to shows or whatever between the two states. So there is the horse culture, the riding culture is very similar. So his mother is kicked by a horse and it turns her into a harridan. And she rapes him 40 times. I don't know, honestly. And I was going to react to his deal like so many people have, but I don't have the capacity with this phone. Maybe the next phone I get, I need to be able to do reactions. That's like important. So that's something we're going to do with the next phone, be able to do reactions. But I don't believe his mother or his sister engaged in penetrative sexual relations with him. A lot of times, people, when approached with horrific events, have their minds break down with even consideration of it. And obviously, his mind's been gone a long time from the trauma and abuse and so forth and so on. And I don't discount the abuse that he suffered. I just don't believe his mother raped him 40 sometimes. I believe his mother engaged in behaviors that could be construed as rape by a late millennial, but it was not actual rape. Rape of his privacy, rape this and that, but not actual penetrative rape. I'm sorry, we have to distinguish between the two because I swear those women are all trannies.
Yeah, the more I look, the more I agree.
And catch our new episode on with we're a bit of digression. Catch our new episode with Ixabert, live with Ixabert at every night at 6 o'clock on station TRANNY, Philadelphia. Yes, I get both ends in there. Yeah.
I think so.
So that's our sponsor for the day, our station TRANNY. But going on with this whole deal with his father, and this is normal for 2000s children, and I wanted to talk about this because I have the solution, and I like to give the solution right off, and that was generational bullying, which a lot of people lacked. And the reason that a guy like him can come out and talk so much nonsense in today's society is because there was a lack of generational bullying from the people 10 years older than him who didn't brutally bully him until he stopped talking a lot of nonsense, basically. The more nonsense he talked, the more he should have been bullied. But he wasn't bullied because even those people who disagreed ardently with him, virulently with him, could not handle him because they were not in the position to show any aggression against him. So they were incapable of overwhelming him. Even within it, in their primes, he's not in his prime. He's younger than his prime, but they're still incapable of overwhelming him, and that's very significant. So, what emerges is that this guy, becomes a figure. I believe he's in his 30s now. I don't know. He might be in his 20s. He becomes a figure, a preeminent figure that I've never heard of. But I mean, he's had like hundreds of thousands of followers apparently. Obviously favored by the algorithm to a certain extent. Obviously. So what emerges? We're talking about his background, and I believe his father worked for the government in some capacity. His mother, and like I said, they both come from a pseudo rightist background, conservative, early 2000s. Probably the worst background you could come from because uh, this goes back to the idea of conservatives being the most aggressive at holding the line, whatever that line may be. So naturally, we have the stereotype of the limp-wristed liberal, and he may believe the exact same things as the conservative, more or less, but just the things he is more in doubt about, he is more limp-wristed about it. Whereas the conservative is willing to physically put his money where his mouth is on a number of issues, and aggressively chart a course, so to speak, for ideas. So, where this comes into place, G.K. Chesterton said famously, the business of liberals is to make mistakes, and the business of conservatives is to prevent those mistakes from being corrected. And you see this with Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter. Elon Musk takes over Twitter, and all of a sudden, I can't access Twitter on my banned account. And none of the top level guys, aside from a few, what do they call them, mid guys, old light types, is allowed to proceed on Twitter because Musk's enforcement policy makes my Twitter time out after about 5 minutes. So I have 5 minutes to peruse Twitter from my banned account. Also, I can't peruse Twitter anymore without an account, period, which you used to be able to do. So Musk has been really good at enforcing the borders and boundaries and rules and regulations of Twitter. And this is what conservatives usually are good at. They are used to being very efficient at enforcing the existing status quo, which is not something you want done. You want the status quo repaired, not maintained. And so you see this with the education. I think of the book, The Education of Little Tree, and then I think of The Education of Rudyard. Obviously, there needs to be a book written by somebody like myself, The Education of Rudyard, the 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 growth and development of a young boy in the 2000s by his mentally ill mother and passive faggot father. And and what's funny is the structure of women his father is attracted to, because Rudyard later claims, that when he's having a PTSD attack, the woman his father is now dating tells him it's just for attention or something like that, or he's weak and this and that. So his father continues to date women like his mother, who supposedly tortured him and raped him and all this. Uh, Obviously, This is a pretty normal behavior by a lot of right wing women because they tend to be very aggressive, and it's very hard to rein them in because the men who tend to get with them tend to be in awe of hard driving women. It tends to be a big thing on the right is hard driving women. A lot of people don't realize this, but uh, in rightist circles, they adore masculine women, daddy's girls, tomboys, so forth and so on. That's the deal. And not in a sense that they go out with an alpha male and produce this Superman, whatever. In the sense that they always pick a whale. What the hell is wrong with me? I kind of was trying to save time and combine words. I said a whale there, a male, a weaker male, and we come up with the term whale there. So apparently that only demonstrates my own autism. But uh, they come up with a weaker male in all respects and purposes because at the end of the day, women feel incapacitated by even a man of what they might consider equal to their whose talents are equal to theirs. That alone will incapacitate a woman. So it's very interesting to see how these women raise their children over a period of time. Horsewomen, Rudyard points out, and I just thought this was an interesting aside. She trains him to be an expert horseman, but he doesn't ride anymore. So that's one of those interesting asides because what she tells you is, in all likelihood, she's just an aggressive woman, and while he views her behavior towards him as abuse, a stronger son of hers might not see it as abuse, just general mothering, what have you. So it's very interesting to see how that develops, but I do see his problems, and all his problems emerging in his existence on the right as a very interesting happenstance. Because, as I said in the beginning, he would not have emerged uh, in a era, that didn't put him down. So, in most cases, somebody would like him would not have risen to prominence because there have been half dozen people putting their foot on his head every time he popped his head up. This didn't happen. So he grows up to believe he's a smart boy because, as I said, the millennials couldn't handle the Zoomers at all. People born after 2000 are Zoomers, right? Pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they couldn't handle the Zoomers at all. And that's not unusual. We look at Generation X. Generation X can't handle the boomers. Vox Day always talks about the day of the pillow. Why are you going to let these boomers go to their deathbed and then you're going to smother them with the pillow? That is not a masculine effort. It's like in the Bible where King David tells King Solomon, do not let your general's gray hair go down to the grave in peace. So, in other words, you're going to let him go all the way to his bed, his deathbed, and then you're going to smother him with a pillow. And that is not how you gain power over anything. And if you do gain power from it, you're not going to hold on to it for very long, as many Turkish sultans could tell you. That was the favored technique for getting rid of the old man, and it didn't work out in many monarchical arrangements. So this is what's happened in the case of millennials being just like Generation X, being afraid to confront the boomers, being afraid to confront Generation X, being afraid to confront even the people younger than them. And that's where the problem emerges. And this is how this guy arises to prominence. And so he's a very interesting person because nothing he says is of any interest or reality. And that's one of the worst parts of it is he is very mundane, very pedestrian, very bourgeois. And he talks about being good with women, 6'4", he's a good cook, what have you. I do believe he's tended toward doing well with women because women like pliable men. The more pliable, the better. I do believe that he has a very small amount of money. It's fairly irrelevant. And what's interesting about that is, as I said, that all ends. He is part of a downwardly mobile cycle. He and his sister are both there, and this is the case in which his parents, namely his father, are given some money. But the thing is, people who get money into today's society, it's not meant to last them. There's no such thing as generational wealth, as I was talking about earlier. That money is meant to just do enough to hurt them, and their families, and then they'll lose it over a period of time. So the money comes and it's taken away at some point. And you see this with a lot of people. I think a lot of people are basically gifted money. People say, "Oh, I earned it." No, you didn't. And we'll see what they do with it. See how they handle it. See how their kids turn out. And in this case, that's the whole point of your kids being honor students and this and that, and D1 and that and so forth and so on, and graduates and valedictorians, because those are all signs of being a bright kid who knuckles under and is willing to go along with the status quo, which is a very valuable deal, and it basically enhances uh, the elite's appreciation for their judgment, that they judged wisely in allowing the parents to have those resources in life. So it's important in that respect. But overall, you see what happens in these mid-range uh, areas. For one thing, I think we've been under a low-key molestation epidemic for a very long time. A mass molestation epidemic that may not necessarily mean some type of penetrative rape, but does include a type of trauma that maintains or perpetuates the cycle, which is necessary because you have to make sure everybody is traumatized on a certain level to function in order for society to function. Our society is built on trauma. A lot of people don't understand this. And without the prerequisite trauma, you cannot be a good citizen, a good member, a productive member of society, and so forth and so on. You cannot do any of that. That's not possible. You need your trauma. And if you don't have trauma, they'll give you some trauma. But in the case of, it doesn't need to be arranged and conspired upon. People who have been to whom has been administered a certain degree of trauma are going to in turn administer a certain degree of trauma to the next generation, onto the next generation. What do you call it? Onto the third and fourth generation, and make sure that goes down regardless of the circumstances. So this is what happens, and how you process that trauma is very important, because as you see, What If Alt Hist has not processed that trauma specifically well, because he has not become a valuable member of society. He's become a gadfly or what have you. And this is not a specific criticism of him per se. It's just obvious that he is not a success in life by the standards of Zog. And that's what Zog wants, and that's the whole point of the trauma cycle, is to see how you factor. Does the trauma cycle ruin you, or does it leave you to be a productive part of Zog? And in his case, it clearly ruined him because he is not productive. So that's the basic gist of what, the end purpose is, so to speak. So, the end game is. So, these mid-level, he's representative of a whole class of mid-level kids. Some of them go on to success, others, and a lot of others just stay at home and never succeed, and hope to inherit, but they don't realize their parents aren't have no inheritance to bequeath to them, despite whatever resources their parents currently have, or however great amounts of resources their parents currently have, those resources are not going to pass along to them for one reason or another. So, what if Altis? Uh, One of his problems in society is a lot of his ideas have nobody's, like I said, nobody's ever bullied him properly. He's never been placed in a position outside of being, if not the smartest person in the room, a somewhat smart person in the room. And that's one of the biggest problems with this younger generation. They really are not confrontational. They don't argue with one another, and their fairest term, their fairest term. What is the word I'm looking for? Their favorite term is fair enough. And what's the other one they always say? Fair enough and right. That's what they all say. And these two terms are both signs of mutual submission. So Zoomers and a lot of millennials are very interested in mutual submission. So we'll all get around and submit. It makes any kind of sexual activity very tedious among people of their peer groups. So, but this happens with guys like him, and intellectually speaking, so he starts to think he has a uh, legitimate ideas, which he doesn't because he wasn't bullied uh, by individuals like me over the years because he didn't encounter them because and if he did encounter them, he ran and hid behind a block. He didn't encounter them in his life either because they're so rare. And when he did encounter them, he could hide from them behind his block. And so he is representative of a large number of people who can't handle a challenge. They'll literally fall apart in front of a challenge. So this is a interesting emergence of the Zoomer intellectual, and I think people say, "Oh, he's not a real intellectual, this and that." Yeah, most of his ideas are garbage. We'll just take one at hand: the incel revolution, whatever. There are not enough incels to accomplish anything. You can't. You're not going to have legions of incels. You can't build an army out of. There aren't enough guys. There aren't enough military age guys to build an army in the United States. Healthy military age guys. You couldn't even build a gang with healthy military age guys in the United States. Uh, the idea of the Mannerbund, they don't understand. Even Jack Donovan's concept of the Mannerbund, they don't understand. And not that Jack Donovan ever understood the concept of the Mannerbund. So, yeah, and let alone the idea of how do I fit into the Mannerbund. In other words, Jack Donovan at least tried to think about that from the perspective of a millennial or a Generation X, late Generation X narcissist, but then from the perspective of a later, early Zoomer, mid Zoomer narcissist, I am not even part of the Mannerbund, but I don't even know what I'm talking about. I don't know what I don't know what the Mannerbund is. It's irrelevant because it doesn't immediately fulfill my wants, hopes, goals, and ambitions, and so forth and so on. So there is the idea of a Mannerbund or the purpose of understanding the issue behind it is just completely out, not within the realm of possibility for him. And there are a lot of fat autistic kids who do participate in these activities from Boy Scouts or whatever who would eat his lunch because he literally has no concept of the world outside. The world, his alleged intellectual world, he's afraid of intellectual challenges on the one hand, he's afraid of physical challenges. So basically, he's an extremely online individual who's afraid of any challenges online. And again, he is representative of his class in general. And this is a very interesting uh, emergence of the type of individual who will eventually have to be ended, you know, basically exterminated by any state just because they're unnecessary, they're superfluous. And it's just very interesting to see these individuals in society today. And with that, I would like to give a final Ixobertian greeting to all who made it to the end of this video, and wish you all the best and blessings from Ixobert.